Hello, everyone, and welcome. Today, I'm really pleased to welcome Britt Rollins, co-founder of the National Psychedelics Association. Britt brings more than 20 years of experience in marketing, philanthropy, and healthcare-focused social impact, and he's applied that in a groundbreaking and very pragmatic way for one of the field's most pressing problems. Under his leadership, the NPA has grown a committed national member base, representing practitioners and centers operating in emerging state therapeutic markets. And most recently, the organization has taken a major step forward by launching professional malpractice and general liability insurance, a move that signals not just growth, but maturation of the field. So just as a little aside note, I remember very clearly the first time that I met Britt Rollins. It was on a street corner in Aspen, Colorado during the Aspen Psychedelic Symposium. And I just remember within 90 seconds locking into a conversation with Britt and realizing that I was engaged with someone who is very intelligent and very serious in addressing the infrastructure and structural needs of the field that are essential to growing in healthy and ways that hold integrity and that can meet the existing systems where they're at, which is, of course, a big part of what I've been focused on, what Delphi is focused on. So I felt a sense of relief, Britt, the first time that we met. I remember that conversation like it was yesterday, although it was many years ago. And now you're in a moment of, we're celebrating here today, achievements that have required years of work to get to where you're at. Something I really do appreciate about Britt's work is that it is focused on this essential infrastructure. It creates consumer protection, risk mitigation, transparency, and it helps practitioners to participate in this field and in these markets without jeopardizing their livelihoods. Right? And he does that through a community-based approach. So today we're going to be talking about the why behind NPA, what this insurance milestone really means for state programs and practitioners and access, and what it could unlock for the future of psychedelic services in the United States. Britt, I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you, Leah. Very excited to be here.
Yeah, thanks so much. I'd really like to start at the beginning. And I'm wondering if you could go back to the inception of NPA and what were you and your co-founders seeing as why an association was needed? What problems were you trying to solve for? Yeah, what was your essential why for starting NPA?
Yeah, thanks, Leah. That's a great question and one that's stuck with the team since our inception. And that's been looking at this emerging field of psychedelic-assisted care. How do we lower the cost for providing psychedelic-assisted care such that way more people can afford the benefits of it? And looking at this from a systems level, we understood that this being a Schedule I substance under federal law, that this being a budding new industry, if you will, that had never really seen the lights of day as far as experiential medicine, being a place where you could go to receive care that may not look like a typical annuity pill, SSRI style thing. This was completely different. And we realized that because of the experiential nature of this, it's going to be very expensive to put forward. And then compounded by the fact that typical systems, business solutions, et cetera, would not participate with this field due to the illegality federally. And so really, we realized that the real business problem to be solved at the meta level was how do we help providers, the facilitators, the service centers, lower their costs of doing business such that way those benefits, those lower costs are then seen by the clients. We know that this is going to be extremely important when it comes to mental health and wellness and just societal cohesion in a lot of ways. And what we wanted to do was make sure that it was accessible. And from my own personal experience with underground psychedelic assisted care, it really sits with people who are in a place of privilege and not in a place of need all the time. And really one step towards helping making this affordable would be lowering the cost of providing care. So that's been our North Star from the get-go.
Amazing. Yeah, so it just sounds like you were putting yourself in the place of practitioners, anticipating a lot of the obstacles that there were going to be to this work being accessible and safe, both for the practitioner and for the participant. I'm wondering, Britt, like, now you have a substantial member base. What are some of the things, I know that you could see some of those things proactively? What are some of the things that you have learned over the years from your membership about what it means to participate and what kinds of problems the association should be solving for?
Yeah, we have grown and we now represent over 50% of the service centers in the legal states of Oregon and Colorado, with about 25% of the facilitators across the markets, and continuing to grow as we add on services. So we do now have a large pool of folks to go to and tap into and understand what the real needs are. But really, when I look back to where we began, I actually moved to Oregon right after Measure 109 passed and brought the team here to Oregon to understand what are the needs on the ground, to talk to those who are looking to stand up service centers, those that were going through training before licenses were ever issued, and trying to understand where were their fears, what was keeping them up at night, and how could we be of service in those instances. And early on, we already had some ideas of what that might look like. We saw this in cannabis, very little banking, if any, no way of taking debit cards or credit cards via merchant services. Many of the things a business, a clinic, a health clinic, any other type of service industry would have accessible to them, these were not going to be there. So right away, although we had talked to folks and they'd acknowledged these issues, we had already started the groundwork for some of those. But over time, we realized that these business services are huge and really important. And one of the things when we think about what we're learning from our members, I want to say there's a lot of barriers. But the one thing I hear time and time again is that the folks who are here, who are participating in these systems, they're not in it for the money. They are here because they want to help people, and they are helping people, right? Oregon alone has had something like 18,000 people go through the program. So what we're hearing from them is they are in this and they want to be participating in it, and they see the benefit they bring to so many lives. But we also have to acknowledge that really we can bring in banks, we can bring in merchant services, but there's a bigger issue afoot here, and that's called awareness. And when we look at the people who are coming to these programs now, they're what we'd call seekers, searchers, people who have had an issue, have tried other solutions, and have been on the lookout for what's next, what else might help me. But that doesn't reach all people. There are plenty of people who may benefit and not even know this is available to them. And so awareness has really become one of the key issues facing service centers and facilitators, ensuring that people know these are available, understanding the benefit, especially when you think about the cost analysis that any individual will go through when determining how to spend their pocket money. This is definitely an area where more education, more awareness needs to be raised. And so that's a key piece. I think the other thing we're hearing from our members is how can we take a step forward in advocacy and leaning into a broader range of services and initiatives outside of just business solutions like banking, merchant services, HR, that kind of stuff. And because what we're seeing now is the regulations that were put forth originally aren't necessarily meeting the need of what the market is actually seeing. And so when we think about microdosing, when we think about transportation to and from, these are all issues that have very nuanced inputs and nuanced aspects that we probably hadn't realized until we'd been in it for a year or two of what does good look like. And so what we're hearing from them is help us with awareness, but can you help us by advocating for other types of regulations and ways that we can make this a little bit more seamless, a little bit more accessible, and a little bit less onerous going through the process for folks who are seeking anything within the whole range of services that can be provided. Not everybody is going in for a mega dose, for a heroic dose. A lot of folks are accessing this through just microdosing. And with that should come a whole different level of parameters and what the regulations look like because of the subperceptual dose that's issued. As we've grown and we've been growing, we are still hammering home at what are these business services? What we'll talk about in a minute. Insurance is going to be a huge piece of this, but there are areas that we know that we have to cover, and that's awareness. And really, as an organization, we're being asked to maybe step up more in the advocacy realm and helping regulators understand what's happening on the ground and how we can change regulations to both benefit the program, but also those who are accessing the program.
Oh, incredible. And I love that simple question. What does good look like? And by having an association, you can answer that question from the collective of people who are providing the services, who are encountering all of those nuances that happen within public health. When you talk about the role of the association now in advocating and working with regulators, having a membership base that's actually informing the concerns or the ideas that you're putting forward is really ideal. Now you're leveraging collective bargaining power with these within the system that is based on what the practitioners themselves and the centers themselves are experiencing, and all, of course, for the benefit of the participants. So that's incredible.
Very engaged members also. What we
Yes.
noticed is we went from anybody can sign up and become a member to a paid member base. And although that does sometimes shrink those who want to participate through the goods and services that we offer as part of our membership, we did move to a paid model. What that's done, though, is made the members more engaged. And so they do have an active role, and they will have an active role as an association. This will, as we mature, become member led. They will be elected into the positions of leadership and such. It is a very active membership. And that's what I feel is really important, because these aren't just slights of opinions or just one-off ideas that are thrown into a comment box. These are actual people who are engaged and want to see the success of the field and buy into literally that collective bargaining power.
Incredible. Membership in the association clearly then gives those practitioners and centers a mechanism for having some kind of power in how this rolls out. And what I love about this, and then I want to get on to talking about the insurance product, because that's so important, is what you've created is a tried and true model. This is used in hundreds and hundreds of ways right now in the healthcare system. And you've set something up that we know that works, and it's working now for the field of psychedelic assisted therapy.
Build on that really quickly.
Yeah.
This is just analogous to the health model. And really, we looked at the American Psychological Association as a construct through which we could build the legitimacy of this field. And what we'll talk about, I'm sure, now is the insurance. That was a key part of professional psychology, was being able to provide the malpractice insurance that allowed for those participating to have things like the consumer protection, the parsing of anecdotal evidence to actual data, like claims data. So it is a very big piece, but it's not something that's brand new. We're not reinventing the wheel here.
Gosh, that's exciting. And you've just bitten off a big piece. There's so much more work to do, but let's celebrate for a moment and learn more about the insurance product that you've developed. It's a huge step forward. And when we were having our prep call for this conversation, I got a little bit teary when we were talking about it, because these are the things that I know are so important and are so meaningful to where we can take this and where people can have access to this healing that we all have been so blessed to have access to. Can you talk a little bit about what is this insurance and why it is so critical at this stage in the market development?
Absolutely. So to take a step back from that, over the last 4.5 years, this has been a goal of the NPA is to bring forward professional malpractice and general liability insurance for a number of reasons that we can go through. But really, in starting down that road, we realized that this is going to be an area that's going to have outsized costs that are just outsized comparative to their other budget items, with also what we were seeing and continue to see was really not great coverage terms. And so these are necessary for things like real estate and banking and other areas of business. And yet people weren't really getting what they needed to out of them. Without going into the boring details of insurance, we found an interesting way called a captive to be able to bring these products to market. And we have now received approval by the state of Nevada, which we will be domiciling in, to bring these papers forward. And currently we're in the process of filling our raise, and we have both full commitments and soft commitments that have been made towards the raise as we stand this up. And so commitment of Nevada behind us and starting to fill the raise, we'll be able to issue papers in the very near future. And I think one of the key pieces of that is that these are policies that are being written specifically for this space based on the true risk within these space, not other insurance carriers coming in and pricing a product they already have and to cover their risk and selling it to this market. We're actually creating products based on the actual risks and what's involved here. And so what that means is we're going to be able to come in and provide twice the coverage for half of the premium cost. And so that's going to be a huge step forward for facilitators and service centers when they think about how they want to ensure their businesses and ultimately their financial livelihoods.
Right. So just to ground that a little bit, in healthcare in general, practitioners, doctors have professional liability insurance that's available to them, which means that if there's an adverse event, they're not going to lose their house. They're
Absolutely.
not going to lose their life savings. And so it's a barrier between the practitioner and their financial well-being and the things that might go wrong and do go wrong in all healthcare. So you've de-risked that so that people can work in this field without taking on that layer of what could be catastrophic financial risk.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's pulling that away, which gives confidence both to investor, to individual participants who either want to own a center or be a facilitator, but also to the consumer. It's a level of protection for them too, that if there is harm that happens, there is a route for recompense for that individual. And that helps ensure and assure all parties that there's a level of safety here that without insurance really wouldn't be there.
And I think the point that you made a little bit just a moment ago about this being based on the true risk that's coming from the information in the field. So this is a really important piece about transparency and how the existence of this insurance and participation within this insurance creates transparency where there has been a lack of transparency in the field. Can you talk a little bit about that, how that works, and the implications of it?
Yeah. I think we think about insurance and we think about risk, but there's also this other side called the claims data. And the claims data is really important for us here, especially with something so entirely new in a lot of ways, at least for the US and modern American society. And in that we went through years of the drug war and we were told these will fry our brains. We were told that these would cause not never-ending hallucinations, that we'd fall into these pits of despair, never to return. And so that creates this murky idea of what psychedelics are, psychedelic-assisted care can be. And that kind of informs how we look for adverse events and where we see these boogeymen or not. And we talk about adverse events quite often in this space. Is the state tracking those? Are these other outside advocacy or other groups tracking adverse events? And that's really important. But oftentimes adverse events are transient. They happen in the moment. It's a headache, it's heart palpitations, it's racing thoughts. Those all can be adverse events. But on the back end of that, what is the financial or what is the harm to the system that came from that adverse event? And that's where things get murky. And so what we're trying to do is take anecdotal adverse events that happen in any session and pull that away and start to see, okay, what is the claims data? How often did those adverse events actually result in a financial impact, either to the individual, to the system, or to the program writ large? And so that's what we'll be able to start parse apart and see what is the real risk here versus what is the perceived risk based on transient adverse events.
So it's this perception versus reality. And I appreciate you acknowledging it's a bit of an uphill battle because of previous stigma and misinformation. So accumulating the facts,
Yeah.
accumulating in quantifiable ways in terms of what is true and what is not true about the harms and the risks that we're seeing and the actual consequences of those. Now you'll be able to report out to regulators, to any kind of body that is having oversight to the general public and clear up some of that misinformation and also help the field. There also is a quality control and a Kaizen kind of aspect of this as well, right? So when you start to see the trends and where the harms are, being able to feed that information back to the field so that the field itself can start to solve for where there are harms and to be prophylactic and then preventative.
Yeah, it's really about separating that perceived risk from the real cost and the real harm. It's about what is discomfort and where is there actual harm and helping them understand that. And it's that actual evidence that I believe other regulators are going to want to see as other states look to come online. what is the true risk here for our citizens? What is the true risk to the state, to the health, the public health of allowing these to be put forth? And I think that's the type of information that people are craving right now in order to feel justified in making decisions like we should put up a state psilocybin program. It's the type of evidence folks will feel even more assured of their decisions to move these forward as real markets.
Yeah, I think that the information itself is craved, and also the system that you've set up is desired and craved. And just having that in place actually is a signal to the system. Okay, we are self-monitoring as a field, we're collecting this information, we're making it transparent, we're learning from it, et cetera. And what's really interesting is we've seen some signaling, some very significant signaling from the federal government. There's recently this 3 million plus grant that went to Oregon Health Sciences University to look at the impact of these state programs. And I'm wondering your thoughts about how these things dovetail together.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think it's important that we see the federal government taking these steps to understand how the state programs are working. I think that's really important because it signals that it's more than rogue Oregon flying on her own two wings, doing that thing she does out west. It's really the federal government starting to recognize that there's a there. And as soon as that signal is made, it starts to loosen people's fears around this because everyone knows that without federal dollars, these types of markets can never really reach their true potential or maturation because there's just not enough private money. There's not enough, there won't be enough participants early on to meet that hurdle, right, of growing to that next phase. And it's those federal dollars, it's that federal knowledge that says, hey, this could be bigger. We recognize we've seen the signals. And we need to start to understand what those signals mean because this could really be something that proliferates at a very rapid pace, especially when we look at cannabis. And I think that's another important piece. I don't know that federal dollars were ever spent in the same way to understand a state program on the cannabis. And so this is really important for the markets. It's really important. And I think it underscores the potential of what these operations could bring.
So what you're alluding to is we know this initial investment is about research. It's about looking at how this is operating. But what you're talking about is the potential for the direct investment into the care delivery itself over time. That would be really ideal. So like imagining a time in the future where Medicare or Medicaid are covering these services. That can't be true without some of the things that NPA and you have created, like the insurance and all of the field self-monitoring, self-regulating coming together. It really does dovetail. The timing is actually quite perfect. You're saying we are tracking these things. We're going to be able to give that information into this research. And then we want to be on a path, of course, for public access, for there to be public funds available for public access to these services.
Totally. And the first thing is to do the research, to understand it, to see and study what's happening and how it's happening. And then from there to start leaning into either changing of regulations at the federal level or really leaning into how can they make the programs that are popping up more secure, whether that's through some kind of federal safe harbor or otherwise that would provide additional legitimacy to what's happening in Oregon, Colorado, and soon to be New Mexico.
Amazing. Britt, thank you so much. Before we jump to the Q&A, I always like to ask our guests the crystal ball question. So using your personal crystal ball, which I'm sure you use regularly, what do you see for the field, kind of in the best case scenario, 5, 10 years from now? What does that best case scenario look like, and what needs to happen in order for that to be true?
Yeah. In 5 to 10 years, access is going to proliferate in all kinds of interesting and new ways. But one of the initiatives that we have taken on in the world of advocacy is supporting a initiative to have psilocybin rescheduled. And so within the next 5 to 10 years, that has already been handed to the DEA, and they are working with HHS on what the rescheduling of psilocybin will look like. So it's already very far down the pike, and I would expect psilocybin to have been rescheduled, as well as a number of other psychedelic substances in the next 5 to 10 years, whether that be through the FDA and the determination that the psychedelics have medical use or through just the changes in federal law as it relates to the scheduling of substances. But that's key. First and foremost is the rescheduling of some of these substances. But I also see that major markets are going to open. Within 5 years, we will see a California, a New York, a Texas even opening up their doors. And that is going to really cause that kind of tipping point where now we have these large populous states opening up markets. We're going to see a proliferation in others. And I'm excited for that. But I also think that right now we have to be doing more of what we're doing and what others are doing, what works, and what do we need to make that scale achievable, but also safe. And I think that's critical, but we're well on our way to doing that.
Yeah, amazing. I couldn't agree with you more. And if we wanted to scale safely, to have the infrastructure that you and NPA are building, and then be able to replicate that into the other states as proper regulatory process, but really to have the practitioners and the centers at the heart of how that's being designed is just, it's something that is close to my heart. We believe is the way. We know that it can be true. You're making it true in real time. So I just want to thank you so much. There's questions already popping up, so I'd love to shift to some Q&A. And the first one is from Jody New-Delman. Hi, Jody. Here's the question. Is Britt accumulating health economic data on the cost offset of psychedelic medicine on medical care for chronic health conditions that tend to be the most expensive to insurers, like addiction, chronic pain, and effectively all areas that are impacted by ACEs and stress physiology?
So the question is, are we focusing on the health economic data of how these substances would impact base versus current evidence or current solutions, I take it?
Yeah, so cost offset.
Yeah, so we're not currently studying that, but that is in line with an area that we will want to look into as we head down the path. And the reason for that is looking at these in the real world as they stand now, especially in Oregon and in Colorado, is the richest place to get that data, because what we're seeing is not clinical evidence, but we're seeing real world evidence of how does this work and what is the actual cost implications there. There are a few issues with getting to those economic sets or those data sets at this point, just from where we are in maturation, what's allowed and what's not allowed. But that is an important piece of the pie that we will be looking at as we go forth, because in order for these things to be insured, I think, as Jody had said, they need to show, like, yeah, what is the cost versus the outcome? And is this a better viable economic solution than, say, others that are already being prescribed or being used? And no, we aren't currently, but we will be in the future.
Great. And I think that there might be some initiatives looking at that. I'm not sure if those are public yet. I would expect that and really hope that some of the federal grant that was just issued would be looking at that as well. It's such a critical, important question to the system itself in terms of if there is going to be future investment into these therapies, that there's actually a financial upside for the system and for taxpayers. So it's a great question, and we'd be really excited for however NPA can participate in that. Yeah. Okay, so now Robert Lugo has two questions to you at the same time.
Okay.
Do you have any plans to offer coverage for ketamine providers in states where psychedelics are not yet legal, potentially with an eye to future FDA approvals or state level programs? That's his first question. And do you work with licensed therapists, both in states with medical licensures, such as Colorado, and in states with facilitator-based models, such as Oregon?
Yeah, so the first question around ketamine. Currently, we're looking at psilocybin services for our first foray into general liability and malpractice insurance. But we do see that there is a major need amongst ketamine clinics, especially those who may be providing off-label usage to their clients and to their patients. And so there is an avenue in there, and we are looking at, could we be a cost-effective solution for ketamine clinics? And so that will be an area that we explore in the very near term. To the second question on clinicians versus facilitators, Oregon, Colorado, who we're supporting in those states that may be providing this care, this is for either. So either just a facilitator in Oregon who went through a training program and is now facilitating sessions, or it's a clinician in Colorado who has a full-time clinician kind of set up and only does these psilocybin services on the side. Both of those parties will need this type of malpractice insurance, because even the doctor who's in Colorado, who is moonlighting as a facilitator, but is still a doctor, they will still need to be covered. Their medical malpractice insurance will not cover these services. And so they could think of this as almost as an additional policy, a rider on their current, but it's an extra layer of protection that both parties will need for their work in state programs.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, so that rider, that's pretty common in the healthcare system. And
Like a rider, I
to
wouldn't
your
call it a
point,
rider. It's another
yeah,
policy, but it serves in the same kind of add-on benefit, if you
fair
will.
enough. And basically, what you're saying is the existing malpractice and liability does not cover these treatments. If this treatment is what's being delivered to the patient, that is not typically going to be covered. So there's exposure there. And so, yes, you are going to offer that to any practitioner who is working with these medicines.
Absolutely, especially if they're working in the state programs, because that's the real kicker here, right? Because the working in the state, although it's adjunctive to what they're doing under their medical license, it still falls outside of that. And so therefore it should be viewed as a separate insurable entity or practice.
100%. Yes. And Robert's saying thank you. So sounds like we've satisfied his questions. Fantastic. So Megan Richmond has the next question, and she asks, where or when do you see insurance being available to non-regulated work, specifically for churches? Would changes in federal law be necessary? And with that, are there any updates or hope you can give us for insurance for places like us? And of course, Megan is the founder of the Plant Magic Cafe in Denver.
Hi, Megan. Great question. And we are looking into that as well. The beauty of what we've developed here is this is business to business kind of insurance. And because of that, under this captive model, those who are members of NPA would have access to any of our insurance products. What we'd look to do in the future is, how do we provide that same level of protection for a church or even an underground practitioner, knowing that what we're really doing is setting up standards of care, standards of excellence, what it looks like, what does good ethical practice look like. And by doing that, regardless if you're working in a regulated or even unregulated model, if everybody's living up to those standards and meeting those standards, in essence, there are avenues in which we could take to ensure those practitioners. And so we are looking at opportunities. First and foremost, we just got to get the products into the hands of those who are licensed that we originally set out for. But there are plenty of doors for us to open that would allow us to then make the same type of coverage opportunities, either through the same policy or slightly different policy for churches, for underground practitioners, et cetera. It's really a agile model that can fit many needs as we grow over time.
Yeah, so just to riff on that a little bit, I wonder, Britt, if you were to do something like that, would you be looking to partner with organizations like the Sacred Plant Alliance, SPA, who have already set up standards, or would you be creating your own? Do you have a sense of that?
Yeah, we would be looking, as always, we lean into the field. We're not sitting in an ivory tower dictating how things should look or what should be happening. It would really be kind of consensus amongst those members and those in the field to understand what is working, who has already created standards or other ethical codes, what have you, that can be adopted and used. And pulling those together and elevating what the collective really feels is important, I think, is going to be a critical role for us to play. It's not to determine for, it's to find consensus among. And that's really what we will set out to do and elevate there. So I think a big part of this is leaning into where there already have been major headway made in some of these issues and just bringing that to light as a place that everybody can then kind of support and get around.
Awesome. So really just like a deep commitment to that community-based wisdom generation, right? Learning from the field itself, what's needed, what's possible, what do we want to see happen? What do we think is in highest service to participants and to practitioners?
That's really important. I can't even underscore that enough because this has never been done. This is brand new. So I don't care who you are. If you say you've got this figured out, I'm going to guess that the people on the ground who've been doing and seeing the 18,000 people who've been through Oregon and soon to be all the people who've gone through Colorado, Those people who are on the ground, they know better than any of us. This is brand new and they've lived it. We can all sit back and read our books and talk about analogous issues and stuff like that. But when it comes down to it, who's been in the trenches, who's seen the day to day and really understands what works and what doesn't? There's just so many nuances to this that are unknown unknowns, right? There's just things that we won't know until we know it. And who better to inform this than those who practice day in and day out?
Absolutely, absolutely. And we just have a couple minutes left. And I think we've well established here how important the work of NPA is for the growth of the field, for safety, for scaling, for access. And so it leads me, I'm sitting with a question. You mentioned earlier that you're in a raise for your insurance product. And so I would really love to hear a little bit more about that. You are going to have to de-risk. You're not going to get underwriting unless you can financially de-risk this product on the front end. You're doing such a heavy lift. Can you tell us a little bit about what your needs are for the raise?
Yeah, no. So we've already pretty much de-risked this as much as you can at this point. We've gone through the process of assessing and surveying the field, understanding where the risks are, looking at the actuarial scenarios, and understanding with the regulators what is needed in order to do this. We've presented our case to the state of Nevada, and they have accepted it, and they have greenlit us to move forward, which means we are filling out the raise at this point. Without going too much into the details, for all kinds of legal reasons, I can't dive too much into the raise or what have you there, but we are still seeking committed individuals who want to support this initiative such that way we can quickly fill out the raise and move forward. Like I said, we already have received dollars and have commitments. So looking to fill that out and finalize that in the coming month or so, so that way we can have policies in hand as soon as possible.
Yeah. And can you be any more specific about what is the amount that you're raising?
Right now, our target raise is at 3 million, and that will cover the regulatory capital that will be required to offset the policies we write, as well as provide the runway we need to staff and then look into all those expansion efforts, like providing for churches or ketamine clinics or even underground practitioners. That will be when the rubber hits the road. But the hurdles we've made it through thus far were some of the more difficult, helping state regulators understand from an insurance standpoint that this market is safe, that the risks aren't outsized, and there actually is the potential here for insuring and making what were the unbound risks into what we call managed risks. And then with managed risks, you can reduce those because you add in different things like accreditation, credentialing, things like that, reduces risk and helps make the entire thing safer and much more easily investable.
Absolutely. And having founded an insurance company before, I was like, that number sounds about right. And you guys have a history of using funds really efficiently. This is not your first rodeo. I think that the last point that you make of also needing to build out those other pieces and that kind of really completing the pie, and that will also need resources. I really am hoping that all of those funds show up for you guys in the immediate sense. You're not wasting resources looking for those funds so the field can move forward. And just want to end on a note here, Britt, of what you're doing is actually really heady technical work, and you do it with such heart. And we appreciate you for that and really appreciate you talking with us today.
Lee, I appreciate you as well. Ever since the day in Aspen, have been very fond of you and your work. So thank you for having me. This has been wonderful.
Truly, it's such a pleasure. And what really makes us most wonderful is the folks who show up for these conversations. So thank you all for being here today and for the great questions. We will send out this recording. We hope that you will share it with your friends if they were not able to attend today. What Britt is talking about here today is an inflection point in what is possible for the state level programs, and we celebrate today. So thank you so much, Britt.
Thanks, everyone.
See you next month.